In this week's Technique Tuesday video, I'll demonstrate a method of grafting that is easier to learn, remember, and execute than the Kitchener stitch. If you've avoided cuff down socks because of your fear or distaste of the Kitchener stitch, this is the technique for you. As always, if you'd like to jump right to a specific point in the video, there are direct links down in the description. This swatch is a simulation of a sock toe. Sock toes are finished off using a method of grafting that's frequently called the Kitchener stitch. And that really refers to the process that is used as you are grafting that creates this invisible join between two live sets of stitches. Typically when we graft stockinette fabric or even reverse stockinette fabric, we keep the stockinette side of the fabric facing out when we do it. For this method, it's the reverse. So we need to get this turned inside out. If you've been working on circular needles, either in magic loop or in the two circulars method, slide your stitches onto the cable in order to do this. So you're just going to push the long end of the sock through the opening. You're not trying to push the needles through the opening. You're bringing up the sock through the opening in order to turn it inside out. The next thing we do is we get the stitches on the needles and we thread a yarn needle. Then the process works like this. You take the yarn needle and you push it through both of these stitches pointing away from you. So you need to make sure that you're getting it through each of these stitches. Get it through that first one, you get it through the one on the back needle, and then you pull the needle through like that. Now you see the yarn is attached to this back stitch right here. We can let this stitch just come off the needle right now. Now the second step is to bring the needle through both of the stitches on the back needle and the front needle, but with the needle pointing toward you. So again, you bring it through that stitch on the back needle and then through the stitch on the front needle. And then you pull the yarn through. You can pull it kind of snugly, but not too tightly. You can always adjust the tension later. Now we want the yarn is through this stitch on the front needle. We want this stitch to come off. And that's all there is to it. You insert through the front needle, then the back needle, pull the yarn through, let that stitch off the needle. Then you come back in the other direction, pointing it toward you as you go through each of the stitches and pulling the yarn through. Now you don't have to wait until you've pulled it through in order to knock the stitch off the needle. You can insert through the front needle, insert through the back needle, and then let it come off the needle before you pull it through. That direction works okay. I find it more difficult to do that in the opposite direction. I find it hard to get this front stitch off the needle without knocking the back one off. So you can do it in either way, but that is the process. If you get interrupted in the middle of your grafting and you don't know where you left off, look at where the yarn is attached. I can see that the yarn is attached in the front and that I've taken that stitch off the needle. So now I can go through this direction and pull the yarn through and let this stitch off the needle. It's going through both stitches, pull it through. If you forget to take that stitch off the needle and you start to go through, you'll see that your needle is entering where the yarn is coming out, and that is going to cause that stitch to come undone, but that's also your self-correct. If you're putting the needle in where the yarn is coming out, then you know that you've forgotten to let that slide off the needle first. So on your final step, you're going to go through both of these stitches and you're going to let both of them come off the needle at the same time. Your yarn tail is right here. It's already on the wrong side of the work, and you can use it to weave in the ends. And you can check on this side. If your tension is loose on the stitches that you grafted, you can tighten them up as you need. You look to where the yarn tail is ended and you know that you started at this end. And if you needed to, you could adjust the tension across the stitches to make them all match. I often say in my technique videos that in knitting, there are always multiple ways of getting to the same endpoint, and grafting is no exception. This process of grafting is distinctly different from the process we call Kitchener stitch. It therefore deserves to have a name that uniquely identifies it. I had never seen this particular method of grafting until last week when I found a description of it in volume 4 of the Finchley Manuals of Industry. In this book, published in 1852, the technique of grafting was described as being useful for repairing stockings and other things. Using it to close sock toes was not mentioned because sock toes described in the book were round and the decreases were more like what you'd see in a hat, with the final few stitches fastened off by pulling the yarn tail through the stitches and then cinching the opening closed. The wedge-shaped toe that is so common today wasn't unheard of in the 19th century, but it doesn't seem to have been as common, and the method for closing a wedge toe was typically the 3-needle bind-off. World War I was the catalyst for popularizing a wedge toe with a grafted finish. In Canada and then the United States, this style of toe was called the Kitchener toe, named in honor of Lord Kitchener, who was commander of the British forces. While there are many stories that Kitchener was the inventor of the grafted toe, there is no real evidence to support that. Outside of North America, the process was simply referred to as grafting. I suggest that the grafting process I demonstrated today be referred to as the Finchley Graft in order to differentiate it from the Kitchener stitch. If you'd like to try out this method on a swatch like the one I knit in my demonstration, there's a link to instructions down in the description. If you have any comments or questions about today's video or suggestions for videos you'd like to see in the future, you can leave those down in the comments below or join the discussion in my Ravelry group, Rocks. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.